Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Energy Theatre for Day 2 of Data Centre World. We have a packed programme today, so some really good panel sessions, culminating in the great debate at 4 o'clock, which will be SMRs, the only way to power this industry moving forward, question mark, debate. So with no further ado, we're going to start this one. So this is an interview. David G will be our host and moderator. We've got John Healy from Keysource and Matt Edgley, the CEO of Data Centres. Healy's case study. Over to you.
Thank you, John. So we will talk today about heat reuse, a case study for Datum Data Center in Manchester area. Please, Matt and John, introduce yourself.
I'll go first. Matt Edgley. I am the COO of Datum Data Centres. So we operate regional data centres nationally. Currently, we've got one in Farnborough, one in Manchester. We're currently building a second in Manchester, and with plans for a second shortly after in the Farnborough region as well. Largely co-location services to enterprise. So it's pure co-location, racked power network. We've been going since about 2010.
Hi, good morning everybody. My name's John Healy, I'm the COO of Keysource. So we provide services to support the life cycle of data centres, headquartered in the UK, Gatwick. We've got offices throughout the UK, Europe and in the US as well.
Thank you. So why are Datum progressing with the heat reuse project? What are the reasons? And did you just feel that this was the right thing to do, and or there are other pressures?
I think there are pressures. It's definitely the right thing to do, and I think for a number of reasons. So obviously, as a data center operator, and you're generally seen as an intensive heat user, and potentially an environmental monster for people who don't quite understand everything that goes on within a data center. We get more and more pressures to improve PUE, more and more, not just pressure, but also interest in meeting social ESG aspects. So as more and more legislation comes in, I think with more financial penalties, more and more legislation and law, I think it's certainly the right thing for us to do, and we have to be looking at it. We're not heat reuse experts, and we need a lot of collaboration with other parties, but we're certainly a generator of that heat, and I think it gives us the opportunity for data centres to be seen as a source of renewable energy as well as just a source of intensive energy use. But it's certainly the responsible thing to do, and from Datum's perspective, ESG is an extremely important part of what we do, both in part of where we're located and just generally as a business.
I think just to add to that, Matt, what's really interesting about this particular project and where you're locating this new data centre site in Wythenshawe, there's a huge amount of investment that's planned for the local area. So over 750 million that's been planned to spend, and a lot of that investment is also ensuring that there's an environmental aspect to that spend, so renewable energy sources, how to reuse the heat for local dwellings. So it's just a great opportunity to contribute to sort of the local social goals, environmental objectives, for them to also leverage the waste heat that obviously you're going to produce.
Yeah, I think that's where the collaboration is really important, but it's also very difficult. I mean, we're in South Manchester area, which has got a master plan for redevelopment, and sustainability is a huge part of that redevelopment. I think that within 25-30 metres of us, I think there's 650-700 council dwellings being developed, social housing, affordable housing, shared ownership type schemes. And if we can't collaborate with the council on those kind of obvious social opportunities, then we're going to struggle generally. I mean, how we're ever going to get a national heat network in place when we can't operate the local community projects for social good. we have to be able to make this happen.
Thank you. And was this related to planning consent?
It wasn't. I think more and more it will be. In this particular case, no. They're obviously interested in what you're doing from a social and sustainability point of view, biodiversity, plans for landscaping, what have you. But they don't, at the moment, with our local authority, they haven't gone as far as you must implement heat reuse or heat recovery or what have you. But I think that's coming, but it's not there yet.
I think just to add as well, David, that's what's really interesting with this particular project, where in the area of Wythenshawe, it's actually a Green Party area, which is one of very few, and so obviously part of Matt and Dayton's journey to develop the site, put the planning application in. There's a number of policies that they're asking to meet, and clearly sort of bear an influence on whether you get those approvals or not. So, whilst the district heat network itself, as Matt said, wasn't a condition of planning, there was various things that they did want to know, which could it contribute to these objectives later, but also things like renewables, like solar power, played a part, I'm sure, of the project getting the relatively quick approval that it did. So it's actually, for us as Keysource as well, not just in Matt's project, but in others, it's a real key theme to just understand that local authority as best you can, so that you can kind of navigate how we best ensure that this project, this data centre, is going to have a positive impact to the local community. And of course, as Matt's touched on, not only is that to support some of the ESG goals of that local authority, but also the business goals as well, because they drive a large part of this as well.
Next question is, who is taking the heat, and was it difficult to find a recipient?
It's certainly not difficult to find in our case, because we are. It's quite funny, because if you look at the Wythenshawe Town Council master plan, we're there etched in red, so they know we're part of this general development. In fact, we probably kicked it off with our own private investment. The council investment that's going to follow, they're leaning on us from the point of view of trying to attract tech to the area. Fibre networks are strong, and that's part of the selling point of the area. But what we need to push a little bit more is collaboration to actually use it. I forget what the original question was, so I've gone on a tangent. But
I'll jump in, because what was sort of quite interesting is that the commitment to spend and regenerate the area had been actually done prior to Matt sort of going live with his planning application. So you've got this scenario where they've made a list of all these things that they want to do in the area, and they've sort of made some really good assumptions that they're going to need a whole bucket of money to do it. But I don't think they really understood the opportunity that they had with Datum and the site, and how they can potentially leverage that to benefit these objectives and goals. So I think they've had sort of a bit of a result really in that respect. And I think when Matt came and knocked on the door and said, "Can we have a conversation to how we best collaborate and sort of do this together?" I think you had a pretty good.
Yeah, they are starting to listen now. I think everybody's got these social goals and efficiency goals and carbon reduction, net zero goals, and the council themselves have. So we're giving them the perfect opportunity to lean on that or to leverage that for their own good, really. At the same time as we're providing potential customers or enterprises the opportunity to also assist with that by locating their equipment within a data centre that supplies local housing or local homeless shelters or whatever it might be with usable heat systems. But you have to have that collaboration in the middle. And the Green Party conversation was quite interesting, really, because as a data centre, to go to a ward council made up of Astor Johnson and two other Green Party members was quite daunting, really. But they were very welcoming of the plans, and that was a big part of it. We're doing PV, but the heat reuse and the interest in that because I don't think there's anyone completely clear on the direction that they want to take, particularly within the council. So I think people offering them on a plate is, is potentially gold dust for them in what they need to achieve.
Yes, and keen to hear about how Datum and Keysource are working together on this project.
Yeah, you probably tell John knows a lot about what we're doing. So Keysource are our design and build partners for this particular Manchester site. So
Yeah, no, this particular project we sort of kicked off probably about a year ago now, and it's been an interesting journey. We've sort of gone through from very much that briefing stage with Datum, understanding the target clients that they want this facility to attract. We've obviously worked to understand some of the common limitations that the operators are in. How much space have we got? How much power have we got to play with? And how do we really optimise this design? So, we've covered the basis from in terms of target customers, the type of design that they're going to want to see, and then for us, it's been spending the time on making sure that how have we built renewable energy into the project? How can we have the design flexibility to support these local heat network projects when they arrive? So yeah, it's been great, and also some of the bits we'll touch on later, some of the whole life carbon calculations that we've been doing as well on both the embodied and the operational to sort of make design interventions where we can. So there's been a very clear direction on this project. Everyone's been very clear on what the drivers are and what the key milestones are, particularly. So yeah, it's been a good collaboration over the last 12 months.
Great. And now I want to ask some technical questions, which can be interesting for our audience. What is the potential IT capacity of that center in Manchester, in megawatts?
The IT capacity itself is about 2.5 megawatts. So in terms of that first phase deployment, so in terms of the context of this discussion, we've got 2.5 megawatts of IT load. As we know, the majority of that's going to be heat load. So our objective with the plate heat exchanger arrangement that we've got on the cooling system is to transfer that heat into the district heat network. Thank you. That's our starting position.
Okay, and what is the Manchester district heating potential of future use? In megawatt or quantity of houses?
Yeah, well, as Matt said, it's the site in terms of where the data centre is located is literally 20 metres from where they're going to be starting the housing development. So they've quoted anywhere between 700 to 1,500 dwellings on that particular piece of land. So when we kind of look at that just from a high level perspective, if I took the high number, 1,500 houses, if they sort of averaged a 10 kilowatt heat load demand, and we're kind of looking at a 15 megawatt load in the district housing network. Now, we don't have a 15 megawatt load to support that, but as we know, this is going to be a variable load, so that's not a consistent demand on the network. Typically, when we look at other heat networks around the world, they're sort of sized at maybe 50 or 60% of the actual demand, because that's the type of capacity that's needed to support. So, what the objective is with the amount of capacity and with the amount of heat load that we've got, we make sure we transfer that into that heat network so that those housing developments can make use. The collaboration piece that Matt mentioned is really important, because when we start talking about water temperatures and things, is that if they develop these dwellings with things like underfloor heating technologies, they operate at significantly lower water temperatures, so we can start to really serve that housing area without any major loads on heat pump arrangements and things like that. So that's the objective. I think just a footnote as well is because of the size and the scale of the development, there's also other people that are contributing to the network as well. It's not just kind of Datum sitting there. It's all on you guys to increase that capacity. So there's going to be commercial properties, there's going to be restaurants, there's going to be laundrettes, all these things that can feed into the network as well.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, this is a redevelopment area, so they are looking to attract other potential generators to the area as well. So we need to be able to show willing to kind of demonstrate the case for them.
Another question is, what is the difference between winter and summer time in distributed heat demand?
okay. Well, fortunately for us, Manchester doesn't really have a summer, so it's going to be consistent all the way through. No, it's an interesting kind of discussion because part of the design enables that heat transfer into that network. We then have to collaborate with the network owners to make sure that we know how that's going to serve both the demand, but also the change in that demand based on the environment. So we're going to have low demand in the summer, but we're going to have higher demand in the winter for sure. So things like thermal energy storage, which is going to potentially play a part on the sort of housing development side, if you like. They're the areas that we want to get into sort of those next phase discussions. We put in the foundations to enable this project to be feasible, and now it's sort of kind of in the fine tuning really about how we do it on an individual property basis. Is it radiators? Is it underfloor heating? Is it thermal storage in the summer months? All of these details are things that, as Matt said, the local authority have been really open to say, right, how do you influence this scheme? Because as Matt alluded to, they don't necessarily have all the answers right now, but we can certainly influence it.
Oh, great. And another question about the temperatures. What temperature of water you plan to supply now and in the future?
Yeah, okay. I mean, from a design perspective, the cooling system's been optimised. We wanted to optimise the amount of free cooling anyway. The site's going to run at a sub 1.2 PUE, so we're running at sort of low 20s in terms of supply water temperature to the cooling units. If we take a sort of a temperature change or a delta T of sort of 10, 11 degrees, we're probably coming back at about 32, 33 on the cooling. So what that means is that's the sort of temperatures we're going to be transferring to that heat network. I suppose in terms of those temperatures, as you know, they're quite low for heat networks. We often see those maybe running at say the 60s. So there will be some heat pump requirements potentially to take that up, depending again on what the housing development decides to do with it. But I think what's sort of really also interesting for Dayton is that means that 32 degree heat that was potentially, which was potentially going back to our chillers, right, is not going to go back at that temperature anymore. It's going to be much lower. So once we've done the calculation on the heat transfer, and then we've maybe factored that into dare I say it, into the PUE cap as well, which I'm sure people frown upon. But ultimately, we'll be heading towards one, which is the objective of the ecosystem.
And this is what we've got to do, because if we don't do that, there's no way data centres generally are going to meet the continued improvement targets that have been set. So these sort of things have to be investigated and put into place.
It's fair to say all of the designers, we talked today in the show, we're all operating in between that sort of 1.1, 1.2 kind of margin. So in the design, it's really, really fine. So it's going to be projects like this that start to really make the holistic difference.
And now, financial question. Is that it supplied for free or paid?
I mean, from our point of view, it's more about efficiency, social impact, ESG generally. I think if we can deliver a story locally, particularly where we base our operations, which is key for us, we're not looking at it as a revenue generating opportunity. There's obviously savings in there, potential savings. I'm sure there are revenue opportunities from a connection point of view. That's not the way we're looking at it. We're looking at it from ESG, social benefit, and sustainability, and that's kind of our direction.
And once more about the heat pumps. So, who will own heat pumps and pay for that?
I mean, the current thinking, and this is not set yet, but that will be owned by the developer side. So that will be on the housing development side. There's a couple of good reasons for that, because the design of those dwellings and what type of temperatures they need will dictate the heat pump sizing and the operation and things like that. So that's the plan. It also gives a bit of flexibility in terms of what they do with the development in terms of that final plan. Do they potentially split this up into different temperature rings within the development? All these sorts of things they can start to control. I mean, what's important is, although we can help and we can influence, we certainly don't want to be owning the heating network. Matt's going to get calls from people because their heating isn't working at home, right? So yeah, there's trying to make sure we get some sort of clear demarcation of where datum and these projects can add the value, influence the designs, and then also working with the network operator as well about how that's charged for ultimately, because they'll have a role to play.
Well, that's what I mean. We can only go so far as a data centre operator. We're generating heat, we can provide the heat, but we can't lead the way in district heat network development. I mean, that's got to come back to local councils and authorities and the planners. We can do the best we can do and put the right things in place, but at the end of the day, we're just going to feed in to the network rather than develop it.
And before going to the questions, anything else you'd like to add, to include?
I think the only thing I wanted to touch on was, when we set the rails, if you like, for this project and the direction, not only was there the discussions about renewables and obviously how we dovetail in with the Within Shore regeneration project, but also from a whole life carbon measurement of this project. How do we go about that? So from the beginning, that's been factored into the design. As I mentioned, the embodied carbon calculation of the building, of the products that we're using, where the products are being sourced from, taking into all these scope 3 emissions as well. That's all been baked down into a model. The guys have been able to consider things like the type of frame of the building. Do we make changes? Are there extra columns, less columns? How does that all impact that embodied carbon element? Operational carbon, as I mentioned, the PUE's being driven down pretty low anyway, down to sort of sub 1.2s. The network or the grid itself is decarbonising all the time. So, we feel that actually we've got some really, really good data around this project that can, I'm sure is going to be a factor in some of Matt's clients' decisions making as well in the future. So yeah, just a few things to touch on from that perspective, David.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, it'll be interesting to look at this again in 12 months' time.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's a lot of unknowns at this point. But in 12 months' time, 18 months' time, we'll be able to look back at exactly the process we had to go through to actually get to the point where we could offload some of this heat for social good, for in sustainability reasons. And I think when we've got that reporting and that experience, it'll be important for the industry.
Thank you. From my side, I just want to add that this example, a perfect approval that it's not only a way for sustainability of data center, but also it's help to achieve city authorities to achieve net zero targets, to have renewable thermal source of the heating. So now, please free to ask the questions. John Summers.
Yes, John Summers. Yeah. What I wanted to ask is about the PUE. I mean, it's when you have free air cooling, but when you connect to a water loop, the return to that water loop is not factored into the PUE, because if you look at the PUE, if you get chilled water from the street to your data center, you have to factor that into the PUE. If we're getting it back from the return of heat you supply to a network, we should factor that into the PUE. And I think this is a little bit of a tinkering that we need to do with the PUE. It's not, I know it's a metric that has a lot of problems. I just wonder what you thought about that.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, we have to be really careful, right? We don't want to play with the PUE metric too much. It's been a good benchmark for people to use, but I think as it's done its job. You know, everyone knows what we're trying to aim for in terms of PUE in a sort of a more traditional design sense. So now it's trying to make sure that we're using the right metrics to introduce these more the local contributions that these types of projects can commit to, to complement. So I think ultimately, you know, for Dayton and other operators, the key is going to be to continue to drive down the amount of energy they need to support the workload that they've got. Make sure they're using the data centres efficiently, and that's through a lot of work and collaboration with their end users. But then also making sure that they're measuring that contribution to the local community in a way that can maybe be reported, so that if there is changes in that PUE for whatever reason, it's potentially for good reasons, because we're making other contributions elsewhere. So yeah, probably to your point, John, you know, we could use that PUE metric and make some changes to that equation to come up with a slightly different metric. I think we might have some raised eyebrows in some areas.
Yes, you will.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Right,
John.
just to clarify on John's point, PUE is currently under revision from the ISO, so it will include heat pump stuff. The other thing to consider is that the ERF metric is the one that you would use for heat pumps. Any other questions? Mr. Hone?
Hi guys. It might be more of a logistical question. Obviously, you're going to put some investment in here to work with local authorities to collaborate with the housing that's next door, which is great. But to generate that heat, you need to have servers running, which means you need a data center with clients in. Obviously, in 12 months' time, you're going to have cut the ribbon. You're going to be welcoming customers in, hopefully some nice big anchor tenants.
Exactly.
At what point does the logistics come in respect to obviously his housing estate is looking for heat on a regular basis? Is yours the only source of heat, or are you complementing an existing heat network? So are you adding to an existing heat network system? Because at some point we're going to have to turn around and say, right, we're now ready for you, but we don't actually have the heat for you right yet.
Yeah.
We're waiting for a client.
Yeah. Well, to your first point.
It's just a general logistical question.
No, absolutely. We've certainly, to your first point, we hope we open the doors and we've got customers already settled into it. So we'll be in a bit of trouble otherwise. But I mean, certainly we expect to be using a fair bit of power on day one in seriousness. I mean, we can't predict exactly what we'll be using within 18 months or so, whatever, but having spoken to the council, we've probably got 3.5, 4 years anyway before that housing estate is fully developed and built, which is why this is such a good opportunity, because this is the point where they're putting the pipes in the ground. Well, they're planning to put the pipes in the ground. So talking to them at this point and engaging with them at this point means that we can answer all those questions as we go. And I think there is talk of them putting a wider community heat network in place, and with the rest of the regeneration and the clients that they're trying to attract and the development partners that I know that they're talking to, I know that more generators certainly potentially will be attracted to that region and contribute to it. But us on our own, we're never going to support 1,200 houses anyway. It's going to be a contribution, so they do need additional generators to make a meaningful delivery.
It is a key point though, Steve, because what's important is that whilst there is clearly a benefit of this heat reuse when we have it, the data centre can't always be dependent on to provide it, right? There's going to be variable load, there's going to be clients that might leave, there's going to be variable loads in the data centre, and so that's why I believe it's important to be a contributor to a much wider network. It can be an economic alternative for that, for those dwellings to use to be able to heat their water or to heat the house. But clearly, we've got to look at other things as part of that ecosystem to be able to support it on a 24/7 basis. So that's quite key.
Perfect answer. Bottom line is, as Matt said right at the start, don't want to get the phone call from Somebody saying that, why's the shower gone cold?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're in a business that's
Yeah.
providing co-location space, but leading by example, at the end of the day, is the right thing to do, and hopefully others will see it and follow.
Well, hopefully we change the perception a little bit, and if we all get to the point where actually it's a social benefit to live close to a data centre or have a data centre within a local community, you never know.
Thank you, Matt. That's quite interesting actually, because if you look at the EU regulations that are coming through, the Energy Efficiency Directive says that if you're a megawatt or above, you need to be looking at your waste heat reuse. So I think in the future, especially in Europe, across the narrow sea, there's going to be some quite interesting things going on. Are there any other questions?
Just one question. I had a meeting 2 days ago with the Department of Energy, and there is something called heat zoning that they're working on. There was a consultation that just finished on the 26th of February. Now, when I asked them, what are you doing about data centers and how are they feeding into the wider heat zoning, there's a bit of silence there. So I'm not quite sure whether they know enough about the heat produced from data centers.
Okay, then that's a great question. Thanks, Oliver. I'm currently working on the Transport Industrial Cooling and Refrigeration project, which is being funded by the NES, and we have put some recommendations in about using the data center heat zone project that you just referred to. Any other questions?
And the second question is, with the fact that NVIDIA are bringing down temperatures on processors, GPUs, how do you see the future with the potential of graphene, post-silicon? Will that make these sort of heat districts defunct?
I can answer on that question. So for now, when we have GPU air-cooled servers, it still use air for cooling. So we still will get the same 32 degrees. But however, in future, if we go to the on-chip cooling, even with lower temperature, we will get higher temperature than 32 degrees anyway.
John, you have another question?
Well, that's not entirely true, because we've got examples where they can't go above 32 degrees with direct-to-chip because of the throttling of the CPUs. But my point is that in Sweden we have high temperature networks, so they're at 110 centigrade sometimes. And the problem with that is you get a lot of losses. I think we need to turn this around and say, provide the heat to a really low temperature network and then upgrade at the point of use. And this is where we need to go, not try and push everything out at high temperature. So I think to the point that temperatures are dropping, I don't think that is too much of a problem. We still need to collect, we still need to harvest that heat, not project it into the environment.
Great.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions?
We are.
Time?
Okay. Yes.
Just like to say that this session was facilitated by the Data Center Alliance. Both Steve and Amanda are in the audience. If you want to speak to them about membership or some of the activities that they do, the 10 by 10s and the Transformation Conference. I'd like to thank my guests, John Healy and Edgley. Thank you very much for a very good insight and case study, and of course, our wonderful moderator, David G. Okay,
Thanks, John.
thank you.
Thanks,
If you've got any rubbish, round of applause.
Thank you, mate.